In his book called Night, Elie Wiesel writes of a hanging of a young boy in a Nazi death camp by the German Gestapo. He said that the boy who was accused of sabotage couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 years of age. The way that he described this young man was that he had the face of that of a sad angel. He said, that's the best way that I could describe him. Well, then he writes about the events that occurred that evening. He said that the Germans first tortured this boy. They brutally tortured him, and then because he wouldn't confess to any crime, they sentenced him to public execution along with 2 other prisoners. The 3 of the victims were then marched in chains to the gallows, including the little boy, because this was going to be a public execution. They had called together thousands and thousands of prisoners because a lesson had to be learned by all. Then the leader of the death camp read the verdict, but all eyes were on the little boy because they had not even seen the Nazis stoop to such new lows. The boy was pale and biting his lip and scared to death. They had them mount the 3 chairs. Nooses were placed around their neck, and then Wiesel said he heard from behind him someone in the crowd yell, "Where is God? Where is He?" Then the executioner kicked the chairs out from underneath them. Their bodies fell, jerked to a stop at the end of the rope, and though the crowd was very large, silence ruled over the sunset that day. Men began to weep. Prisoners removed their hats out of respect for the dead. The 2 adults died instantly. Their tongues began to swell and turn blue. It was a horrific sight, but an even more horrific sight was the one of the child, because the child was still swaying. The child was still alive. You see, he did not have the weight on his body to kill himself through hanging, and so he swung there. For over a half hour, Wiesel records that he hung between life and death, agonizing as helpless eyes looked on. The guards had the prisoners march in front of the boy to see what their rebellion would cost them. And it was then when they were marching in front of the boy that Wiesel said he heard the same man with the same voice say the same thing behind him. He said, "Where is God? Where is He?" And Wiesel said that that day he heard a voice in his heart and his soul that said, "God is dead. God is hanging on the gallows. God is not here. God is distant. God has removed Himself from us." Friends, when we talk about pain and suffering and tragedy in our life, we only have to live so many years before that comes to each of us. And we've been in this series called Why, and we've been discussing some of the big questions in life that deal with why. Why do certain things happen to us? And this morning we're going to talk about why is there pain? Why is there suffering? And why is this happening to me right now in my life? And friends, I'm hopeful that through this morning you'll be able to see that God is somewhere in the pain of your life. In another book named The Hiding Place, Corrie ten Boom tells her story, which was very much unlike Elie Wiesel's. In her book, she describes her experience in Ravensbrück, one of the worst of the German Nazi prison camps. And she tells that as she emerged out of that situation in her life, that she felt that God was ever present, that He was abiding with her all the way through. So she asked, where was God? She said that God was with her in Ravensbrück. God was with her during the torture. God was with her during the times that fleas covered her body. God was with her during the rapes, and God was with her all the way through. As a matter of fact, after being liberated from Ravensbrück, she spent the next 33 years traveling the world telling her story about how God was her hiding place in the midst of such chaos and pain in her life. She spent 33 years traveling the world saying that God was the ever-present help in the time of trouble. She spent so many years on the road that she had no permanent home, and as she began to age, some generous man gave her a home along the ocean in California, and to which she would invite her friends over near the end of her life. And one friend in particular said, "Corey, it is so good that God has been so faithful to you now at the end of your days." And to that, Corey replied, "No, no, no, no. God has been ever present in my life. He was faithful to me now, just like He was faithful to me in Ravensbrook. God has always been good to me." So where is God when it hurts? God is stepping into our sin-stained, sin-soaked world. He's stepping into our pain, into our hurt, and He's saying, "I am not distant. I am not aloft. I am not uncaring. I am here." As King David wrote in Psalm chapter 46, he said, "God is my ever-present help in the time of trouble." Where is God when it hurts? He is in the middle of it all. He's in the middle.